Hi, hello, welcome. I'm Bloom. Thanks for being here. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Simptap acrylic markers from Arrtx. These were really kindly gifted to me. I'm very appreciative. As a disclaimer, I only agreed to receiving and reviewing these markers if I was allowed to speak completely honestly about my experience. And they agreed to that, obviously. So everything I say today is completely my own opinion and based on my own experience. And if I don't like them, you're going to hear about it because I'm not going to lie, but I hope I do like them. So hopefully it's all positive. Either way, I'm really excited to try them out. I've never really tried acrylic markers before. If that sounds interesting to you as well, then stick around. And I hope you enjoy the video. These are the markers that I received from Arrtx. They're the Simptap acrylic marker set of 48 colors. These are the colors that are included in the set. I really like the packaging design. I think the colors are super cute, but I also think it's just a super helpful little box to keep all the markers in. I will probably be storing them in here when I don't use them. I know the packaging is not super important, but in this case, I'm happy that it's pretty functional and I will probably continue to use this packaging, whereas other products, I don't often keep the boxes that they come in because it isn't so useful. Here's a look inside the box. I'm very excited by some of these colors. They're very bright and vibrant at first glance. And then there's also this little instruction manual of how to activate the markers, which I will come back to in a minute. Arrtx also really kindly sent me a sketchbook of theirs. It's an A4 sketchbook and the pages are 180 grams and there's 60 pages. The current A4 sketchbook I'm using is coming to an end soon, so this is actually perfect timing. It has the binding type that lets the sketchbook lay flat, which I think will be very handy when drawing. So I'm excited to try out this sketchbook as well. So it's time to try out the pens. I'm very excited, but first you have to activate all the pens. So when they arrive, the ink hasn't been released into the nib yet, so follow the steps on this instruction sheet. The first step is to mix the inkwell by shaking the pen. I did this for quite a while. You can look through this little opening on the side where the ink is held to see whether the ink is really mixed or not. In some it was more obvious and in others it already looked mixed, but to be safe I just shook every single pen. Once that's done, you can take off the lid and unscrew the cap on top of the pumping mechanism at the back of the pen. And removing the lid allows you to press the pumping mechanism. On the instruction sheet it says to do this between 4 to 5 times, but I noticed that the first press was the one that really released the floodgates of the ink. So you could almost immediately see the ink arriving to the nib. Once you have pressed it and you can see the ink seeping onto the nib, they suggest in the next step to put the lid back on and shake it once more to help the ink flow all the way down so the nib is fully wet. When I first looked at the instruction sheet, it looked like a little bit overwhelming, but the steps were actually really easy to follow, and once you have done it the first time, you knew exactly what to do with the other pens. I will say consistency-wise, not all the pens reacted in the same way, and the instruction sheet for the pumping suggested to do 4 to 5 times, and in most cases, I think maybe 60% of the pens that I activated, I only had to press the pump once or twice, and there was already a lot of ink flowing, so to press it again, I think it would have been too much ink. So instead of really following the instruction sheet exactly, I rather just focused on what the pen did and how the pen reacted, and then making decisions based on that. So if it looked like it was too much ink, I would press more, and if it looked like the ink wasn't really flowing yet, I would press a couple more times. In general, it wasn't a hard process. It was a little bit long. I think I took 20 to 30 minutes to activate all 48 pens, but it was also kind of satisfying and fun to do so that I could see all the colors. So I didn't really mind this process. And here you can see that the pens didn't bleed through onto the next page. You already saw a small look at some of the colors in the last section. While I was activating the pens, I was also testing them out to make sure that the ink flow was good. But here's a little swatch I did of each of the colors. For my personal opinion of the color section of this set, I think there's a lot of range. There's a lot of yellows, a lot of pinks, a lot of blues, a lot of purples, a lot of greens. The only thing that I find a little bit missing is the reds. There's only one red and it's sort of a pinky red. This is a little bit nitpicking, but just personally, I like to use red a lot, so this was the first thing I noticed. And then also the browns, I think in this set are really limited. I like to draw nature a lot. But also if you wanted to draw darker skin tones, I don't think the browns that they gave would work well for that. I did see that they're working on a specific acrylic marker skin tone set. So if you're an artist who likes to draw people, then that could be a solution. I also did a quick swatch into my current A5 sketchbook that is like my daily sketchbook, so that I have it on hand. I had already tested out the markers on the sketchbook that they sent me, and I know that their sketchbook is probably made to work well with markers, so I decided to do my test piece in my art creation sketchbook, just to make sure that the markers also work well with this paper. This is my current go-to brand for sketchbooks, and I know a lot of artists are using them right now, so I thought it'd be interesting to see how the markers held up on this paper. As you can see, when I first opened up the lids again after having activated them, there was quite a lot of ink built up, so they ended up being a lot more liquid than they usually are. This didn't happen for every single pen, but this happened for the first two greens that you see here and a couple of the other ones that I used. I probably could have avoided this by having a little sheet of paper next to my drawing, and when first opening the pens after not having used them for a minute, I think it would be better to use them on the paper just to make sure that there's enough ink or there's not too much ink so that you don't have to ruin your piece. I didn't end up ruining my piece. I managed to save it very easily, but that would just remove any unexpected surprises. Immediately, I already enjoy the brush tip and the way it applies onto the paper. I think it's really satisfying to use, and I love how vibrant and opaque the colors lay down. For this piece, I decided to draw in a little bit more of a painterly fashion, so trying to blend them a bit and layering. But I could also see these pens working in a really beautiful graphic and illustrative style, which I also want to try out in the future. With this pen that I started the skin with, you can see that I think I didn't mix it well enough, because when I first started laying down the pen, it was more of a yellowy color, whereas as I continued to use it, it became a bit more pinky. So then I went back over and went over the yellow from earlier to try and make it more pink again. For this piece, it happened to not really pose a big problem, whereas I could see this maybe being an issue for other pieces. Again, a scrap piece of paper on the side would have probably solved this problem for me, because I just went straight onto the piece. And I also think that I just didn't mix this one well enough at the start, and maybe needed to mix it again before using it here. Since this was my first piece, I still had some learning curve, but this color ended up being way too dark for the light skin tone I was trying to achieve. But I did manage to save it by going over and also blending it out with the lighter skin tone color from earlier. I think what I really like about these pens is their ability to layer even lighter colors over darker colors. They don't layer 100% opaque on top, but they definitely do a good job of layering on top of each other, I find. Once I saw that this technique works, that you could put a darker color and then lighten it with a second color, I did this a couple times throughout the piece to add more dimension and to sort of create more colors than are actually in the set. I managed to undo a lot of mistakes that I made on this face part, which I was really happy to have that ability, as you have with acrylic paint as well. And even though at some points it looked a little bit rough, I think the face ended up turning out really nice at the end. So I think this ability to correct mistakes is something that I really like in an art material, because I make a lot of mistakes. And even though I layered many colors on this face part, the paper reacted perfectly and it didn't seep through or peel the paper at all, so I'm really happy about that. My only other use of acrylic markers has been Poscas, which I think are also acrylic markers, and they really don't layer, and they also like peel the paper below it. So I was really worried that these markers might do the same thing. I was immediately drawn to the greens and the orange colors of the set, so I knew I wanted to do something with nature, and I noticed that the lighter colors would work well for a lighter skin tone, so I also thought I would do a portrait just to try those out as well. So this felt like a good piece to try out quite a big range of the colors that are available in this set. I'm working in a bit of a sketchy, messy kind of way, but I could also see these markers working if you work a bit more clean and a bit more precise. I could definitely see myself using these markers in my sketchbook a lot more. I really love fun pops of color in a sketchbook, but I am too lazy to paint most of the time because it's just too many materials to gather and mess to clean up afterwards. So I'm really happy to have this alternative to painting. which is much cleaner and easier to use and can also be brought on the go. I think this is going to end up being one of my most used art materials probably. From what I've experienced so far anyway, I'm really enjoying them. And even as soon as I finished this piece, I was thinking about all the other pieces that I could make with them as well. I think the only downside I can think of these pens were the fact that the pens each reacted a little bit differently, so they're a little bit unpredictable. Some were more dry and some were more wet, and some required more pumping and some required very little pumping. I know they also have other acrylic markers that don't require pumping, so maybe those have a little bit less inconsistencies to them with the ink flow. But in general, I really love these pens. I'm so excited to continue using them, and I think the piece that I turned out with is a beautiful, bright piece, and I'm really happy to have it included in my sketchbook. I think it looks really nice. If you wanted to check out these pens yourself, I have a bunch of links in the description of where you can find them. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day.